Welcome to Awakenings in Real Life, where we tell inspiring stories of transformation, meaning, and hope. While we typically think of an awakening as a getting up or something religious or spiritual in nature, it's also a recognition, realization, or awareness of something. We're going to share stories of people triumphing over loss, illness, addiction, trauma, bullying, near-death experience, and more. Please enjoy. I'm Dan Cohen, and welcome to Awakenings in Real Life. Our guest today is John Goralski, who came into the studio from Connecticut, and I'm very appreciative, John, for you joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks. I appreciate you coming to the studio. Let me tell the audience a little about you. John E. Goralski is an award-winning journalist and photographer, a publisher, and the father of a son with autism. He resides in Connecticut with his son, Jack, who was diagnosed in the early 2000s. John's book, Parent in Crisis, Finding Peace and Purpose in a Special Needs Home, traces his journey from struggle to peace. The book explores what it feels like to be an overwhelmed parent, and he tries to offer insights into the unique insecurities, social problems, and obstacles that must be overcome by these families. The book explores the way his family navigated communication barriers, divorce, public education, vacations, puberty, love, and even death. Got that? That sounds good?
That's a pretty good intro, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Terrific. So the way I typically start off my podcast is, what was your awakening in real life?
Okay, well, you and I spoke a little bit about that, the awakening. I love that idea of, because I read, of course, your bio too, of your father awakening, and suddenly you're having an intimate moment, a connection that you never thought you were going to have.
Right.
And for me, that was... I don't know, Jack was maybe 5-6 years old. His language was very minimal. And he was going over to his mother's for a weekend, and his mother was sick. So I dropped him off, and just before he got out of the car, I was like, Mommy's sick, be good.
Right.
Probably out of guilt, because I'm dropping him off with a sick parent. But, he's got that calendar savant thing, so you really can't mess with his schedule too much, and we can get into that later.
Yeah, please.
But so I dropped him off, and when his mother dropped him back off with me, she was like, he was great all weekend. I was able to get some rest, and I was like, that's great. And as soon as she shut the door, he attacked me. And that was fairly common in those days. People with autistic children know that they can go from 0 to 60 in a snap. And so he attacked me, and of course I scooped him up, and we went up to his room, and we went through all the techniques we had for de-escalation. And somewhere during that de-escalation, he said, he goes, Mommy's sick. And I was like, oh, we've just made a connection. It might have been one of the first connections I ever really made with this child at this point. And
he wasn't very verbal.
Wasn't verbal at all at this point. And so I was like, this is great. And I got down with him, and I just started talking about what it was like to have a sick mother. When I was, and this is in the book, of course, but when I was a child, my mother had cancer. And I just started bringing all that up, all the, insecurities, all the, the way it affected my day, and I could just feel him relaxing in my arms.
Wow.
I don't know that he understood all the words, but, he was just relaxing, and I was based off of his reaction. We had a conversation about what it's like to have a sick mom and what can we do. And I think at the end of the conversation, I said something like, oh, we could say a prayer for Mommy if you want. And he's like, yeah. So God help Mommy to be happy. And we went on with our day. And I hadn't thought anything of it until I'd say a couple months later, maybe even 6 months later. We were at a party at my friend's house. He's sitting in the, Jack was sitting in the hot tub with me, and his wife was clearly sick. She was having a really tough time. and Jack started getting anxious, and I could see that he was about to have one of his meltdowns. So I excused myself and I took him home, brought him up to his room to calm him down. And before I got a word out, we'll say the woman's name is Sue. I don't remember what I used in the book, but we'll say Sue. And he goes, God help Sue to be happy. And I'm like, whoa. Now it really settled on me what happened. You know, we had made a connection and he understood what happened and he had a coping mechanism for it. Wow. Now for a parent of a child with minimum, you know, communication, that's a big moment. An awakening.
Yeah, and that was an awakening.
It really opened up our world. You know, for the first time, I was actually able to, you know, mentor my child through a situation and give him some coping mechanisms, even if it's a simple prayer.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know Jack actually came with John here today and is watching us and is very comfortable. So how old was he when he was diagnosed?
I think he was around 3, but it was a process at the time. They've changed the way that they diagnose autism now.
Okay.
But back then, we had to go through a series of specialists to actually work our way up to get a meeting with a worldwide specialist who actually gave him the diagnosis. And it took about a year. You know, each test was like, well, everybody that has this isn't autistic, but everybody that's autistic has this. Oh. So, you know, it's kind of ruling out of a bunch of things and gave us a direction right up to.
And how do they diagnose it today?
I think, you know, I'm not an expert in autism.
Okay.
I really know the way it was diagnosed with us, but my understanding is that they changed it into, you know, autism spectrum disorder. It used to be autism was within a spectrum of disorders with like Asperger's and Tourette's and, you know, and I guess a couple of them were taken out and it was all melded together and it's more based on your ability, you know, if you're a high functioning, middle or low.
Gotcha.
You know, I know there's 3 tiers to it. I don't pay attention. Once I get the diagnosis, it didn't matter.
You're not here to give us a medical evaluation. You're here to talk as a parent. Sure. How old is Jack today?
Jack today, he just turned 23.
Oh, happy birthday, Jack. So I'm assuming that when you first got the diagnosis, that was also an awakening moment because...
Sure. It was, you know, one of those things where your heart just sinks. You know, and it was more a crisis moment than an awakening, I would say.
Okay.
Because, you know, all of a sudden you look into the future and you're just overwhelmed. You know, all my life's plans, what's going to happen for me, for my child, you know, the insecurities mount, the, you know, just thinking of like the social issues that he's going to deal with. It's very overwhelming.
Not only is his life what he has to go through, but it's overwhelming for you.
For both, yeah.
For both and your family.
Sure.
And that's what you describe as a parent in crisis.
Yes, that would be a parent in crisis. And nobody's good in a crisis is the basis of the book, you know. You make bad decisions, poor decisions when you make decisions in crisis, and that's kind of what happens with the autistic parent. You know, every parent has bad days,
right?
Of course. But when you're with it, especially in the early days, you know, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea how to help your child. You desperately want to help your child. You're filled with fear. You're filled with resentment. You're filled with all kinds of emotions. And you feel so isolated that nobody understands, you know, and, you know, in that situation, you know, anything could be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
I would think maybe the key word is the first step is understanding.
Sure.
What you're going through and what you got to go ahead before you can learn the techniques and to how to handle it.
I opened the book with a kind of a story about a typically bad meltdown. He used to have daily meltdowns, you know, and it was a particularly bad meltdown. I brought him to work with me. He was a toddler. He was I was a sports writer and photographer at the time, and he was in like a stroller behind me, and I'm taking pictures of this Little League tournament. And he just he woke up too early, and, you know, everything kind of spiraled. I left, and by the time I got home, he was in a full like meltdown, which were big in those days. And it went essentially from then till nighttime. And it was everything I tried failed. Every effort I put into, led nowhere. We ended up, at some point, it was like survival for both of us. And I remember at one point I just said, okay, there's nothing I could do. I slammed the door in his room. I went downstairs and I was just like, please, somebody come and take him from me, and that was the moment where I realized I was in crisis too. Because the thing about crisis, you don't realize it. Like, everything makes sense to me, but I mean, my kid needs me and I left him. It was the worst parenting moment that you can have is not be there for your kid. And for me,
because you didn't understand that you were in crisis.
Exactly.
Did you in that moment think of yourself as a failure? Is failure the same thing as a crisis?
No, I think all those thoughts of failure and stuff come afterwards. I think for crisis, there was a point during the day when it was no longer about him and it became about me. I like to say parents, what's an ideal parent would be somebody who is honest and straightforward, loving and unselfish. And I would say in that moment of crisis, it becomes impossible to be those things.
Right.
Completely selfish to leave him in the room, right? Completely unloving to leave him in the room when he's struggling, and
did you beat yourself up for just at that moment?
Oh, I beat myself up every day at that point in my life, because this was a daily occurrence. This was not like the worst meltdown of his life. It was the only thing I would say an awakening that came out of it is, when I'm looking back on it, I'm like, I realized I needed help too, not just him. And that is when I realized I was in crisis also. He was clearly in crisis,
right?
But I was in crisis too.
Yeah.
And that kind of led to everything that followed, including, we talked about this before, if you're trying to help a drowning man, you got to help yourself first,
right?
And
like they say on the airplanes, right?
Right.
Put the vest on yourself first before your child.
Absolutely. And that holds true. It's hard to think in those terms,
sure,
especially when you're emotional and fueled. But nobody makes good decisions in crisis, No. So I had to figure out how to solve the crisis in me. And this is kind of the impetus of the book. How do I solve the crisis in me? And once I solve the crisis in me, figure out where it comes from, help myself. Now I started seeing my son was having his meltdowns. And when he was having his meltdowns, I understood that now. And I was like, okay, for an autistic, a child trying to understand the world without language, it's got to be confusing.
Sure.
Think about everything that language gives you. It helps you understand what's going on around you, especially your emotions. So for him, what I was noticing, I found that my crises, most crises, emotional crises, can kind of be broken down to one of three things. Security issues, and not just financial security. We're talking personal security, all those other things. A security issue, a social issue, or maybe an ambition, plans, expectations, routines, schedules. Something happens to affect one of those three things, then it quickly becomes a problem. And they tend to overlap and grow until they become, just impossible.
My father, and this is a much simplistic level, when I was going everything, he would say, you got to give yourself a break. Mm-hmm. I would hear those words, I'd feel better. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you go through different things in life. So for yourself, did you get therapy, individual therapy?
No, I actually didn't.
You didn't?
No, I just started looking at myself in the crisis every night before I go to bed. And I still do this on most nights. I say, when was I closest to that moment of crisis? And I start trying to figure out what was going on inside of me. I figured what I've learned is, kind of like that parenting ideal. If in those moments I can sacrifice, my concerns and serve someone else, I can find peace, even in difficult circumstances. And go ahead.
If you can manage the crisis in yourself,
yes,
that gave you the ability to help your son.
Yes. Well, actually, we weren't even there yet at this point in the development. This was just about me trying to calm myself. Okay. And, it was interesting because, sacrifices. Think of people that live in tough situations.
Right.
Maybe Doctors Without Borders, right? They're out in a war zone or something, completely, insecure. You can't be more insecure than being in a war zone. They give up oftentimes money to go do this. They could make much more money working in a hospital or something. And, they sacrifice, maybe even their friendships, to go overseas, and
Sure.
family to go overseas. So those are the social things. And, and then, give up their career path. Now we're getting into ambition. So they all that stuff. They sacrifice all that stuff to serve someone else. And they often can do some incredible things, in some really terrible circumstances.
So do you look at it like you sacrificed a part of yourself?
Yes.
To help Jack?
Yes. I had to learn how to sacrifice. Well, I had my ability to serve right in front of me. I had to sacrifice my own ambitions, my own, security, my own social issues, and, those things in order to help him. And when it really came to fruition, I would say, is, when I started realizing that when he was having social problems, they would mount until they would erupt in rage. If I didn't catch his anxiety early on, his fears early on, they would escalate to rage, because he understood rage. We all do.
Right.
So just like I did when his mother was sick and I started talking about myself, I started talking about myself with him one-on-one.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So when I started seeing him, an emotion pop up, I can put it into words for him. And then I could talk about myself and how I deal with it. And now we're in it together, which is something that was impossible when I was in crisis.
So you understood your crisis, you managed your crisis, you made certain sacrifices, helped you to connect better with Jack.
Yes.
And what I find interesting about that technique that you said, it's not only dealing with what was going on him at that point, but you articulated it into how it, in a conversation between the two of you.
Right.
So what are the other things you have learned about being a parent of an autistic child? And tell us some of the things you share in your book to help other parents in crisis.
Well, number one, an autistic person is just like a regular person. Regular, I hate that word, but just like anyone else. The difference is the language.
Okay.
So they're exploring the world without language. So what I found was when, if I can see his emotions, if I can understand what's going on with him, what he's being threatened with, and put it into words, we're in it together, which we weren't before when I'm slamming a door on him in the middle of a...
Sounds like a big thing for you.
Huge.
In the help is the connection.
Sure.
Right? Not that he's on an island here and you're going to manage his rage or his situations. It's to make that connection.
Yep.
That's very important.
Growing up together.
Growing up together.
Which, is really all healthy parents do.
Yeah.
They grow up with their children.
And, I like what you said, and again, regular person, because really what you're saying is, let's get rid of the stigma, right? Mm-hmm. People hear someone's autistic or someone has this mental illness or that. They immediately attach a stigma to it. Once you could remove that stigma, you could deal with it on a whole different level. I like to say, someone has a broken leg, you get the broken leg repaired. If we don't treat it as something negatively, right, then you can have a positive experience.
Because it doesn't matter if I understand autism. I'm an expert in my child, and we go through the world together. And I've been able to give them coping mechanisms. I've been able to put the world into focus. Not only that, but I've one of the biggest things when I was in crisis was the isolation. That's the social stuff. I just felt so isolated. Nobody understood what I was going through. Probably how you felt right after your awakening. Nobody understands this. This is something I can't talk to with anybody else. And, you find your well-meaning parents and friends heaping advice that just further shows you they don't understand what you're going through.
Exactly.
And so how do I talk with people? I'm isolated too.
Just quickly, we had a situation where my brother's a doctor, right? And he was doing everything possible, though it was his practice taking care of him, but he watched over the medicine that my father had when he was in dementia. And someone said to me, "What are you guys doing keeping him alive?" And we said, this is a family decision. To me, at the end, if he held my hand and kissed it, that was enough for me. So nobody has a right. But you need to be, especially you need, exactly right, to be the expert for your son, because if not you,
who?
Then who? Exactly. You have to be the best advocate for him and yourself.
Yep. And that takes work. It takes, the connection and, the communication. And, over the years, I could spot things in him long before, like the meltdown.
Exactly.
We have experts for everything else. We have, there's doctors will tell you about autism. Like I said, I'm not an expert in autism, but there are doctors. You could find them.
But your son better than anybody else, and you know how to handle it better than yourself.
Absolutely.
And you can seek advice and you can seek help, but don't believe anything you said blindly, because you know best.
Sure. Well, sure.
You know best how to handle your son. You may not understand all the medical terminology, and I don't even think that matters.
No.
It's more important your relationship.
Well, even in the schools, I think it's one of the most overwhelming experiences for a parent of special needs. And in the United States, we have IEPs, individualized education plans.
Right.
For most children or students, they have the curriculum set by the town and all that stuff. But with Jack and his condition, we have to do an individualized one.
Right.
And I remember the first time I'm sitting there with his mother. We're going through a divorce, so we're already stressed out. And around the table are teachers and administrators and specialists and
school psychologists.
The psychologist, the behavioralist, the linguist, and all these ists, and it's really easy to get overwhelmed with that. And pretty much that night, that was my crisis moment, was sitting there at the table with all these people. But, I was able to realize that I had a role and play a role. And I go into that. There's a chapter about it.
I was going to ask you. I wanted to ask you about certain chapters. Chapter 10, Surviving the ISS.
That's it.
Schools and Support Group. Yeah. Just elaborate on that.
It kind of goes to the idea of it takes a village to raise a child.
Okay.
And I hear so many people go into these IEP meetings, whatever you call them. First of all, there's acronyms. I'm saying IEP. They have all these specialists have their.
Sure.
It's like learning a foreign language, but you go in there, you're feeling judged, you're feeling like your child's judged. It's very easy to get defensive, and then be dishonest, manipulative, selfish, unloving, right? And nothing happens. And a lot of times that's what happens. You end up with a lot of adversity, a lot of conflict, But I kind of I realize I'm there as an expert for my son. And
because they have thoughts on how he should be schooled.
Sure.
Can you give yourself the time to enjoy yourselves as opposed to dealing with your son, to give yourself?
Absolutely.
That's important, right?
We have, and I kind of bring it all together at the end. We have a life that's second to none. I say our family life is a fascinating adventure. I was able to work through all the things that a normal parent has to do with a normal child, because we are a normal parent and a normal child. We've navigated, death. We've now, family members, and that's a big deal. My brother, his uncle died, and my father, his grandfather died, and I have to sit down and try to explain it to him and set expectations, right? Which, I have to talk about his security. I have to get him right before we go, to these things. It takes a lot of preparation, but as a result, I've been able to find, peace and purpose, which is really what we're all looking for.
No, and I understand that peace and purpose, but do you give yourself things to enjoy yourself independent of your connection with him? You say you're divorced.
Oh, sure. I just went to Paris this springtime with a friend of mine.
Fabulous.
Taking vacations. Of course, you need downtime, and that is important. In the beginning, I was a primary caregiver, but he went to his mother's, every other weekend, still does, and it was hard for me. Because, you become a little codependent in a situation where,
of course.
And so I found that I had to actually learn how to have fun again, on my own. And these days,
that's important. You got to give yourself that.
Of course.
Right?
But on the other hand, I'd rather spend a day with him than anybody else because he's a lot of fun. Just walking in here today to have him start asking you the birthday thing.
I know.
It's great to watch him interact with the world.
And just to let people know, Jack asked me what my birthday was, and then he told me the day I was born. So maybe we'll. So you also have a chapter that says, "Let the good times roll, overcoming the ordeal."
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So my question is, can you really overcome the ordeal? Or you describe it as that, and maybe you can explain why, or is it always an ongoing process, or both?
It's still an ongoing process, but overcoming the ordeal is the fact that our house is so peaceful and our lives are peaceful. His meltdowns, which were every day, are few and far between. He got anxious today. Driving into New York City, we're going over bridges and traffic.
Sure.
And to be able to take a breath and de-escalate that. I was a person, when I was in crisis, I was having a meltdown myself every day. And I would say it's probably been over a decade since I've had a meltdown.
Wow, that's great.
And it's been one time in the last decade where I had a sleepless night, and it was over something trivial.
I guess I have more sleepless nights
Yeah.
than you, John. So I wanted to ask something. The book is about a parent in crisis in your eyes. But I wanted to ask you, what's Jack like? Tell me the type of person he is.
Oh, he's funny. He's loving. We just got back from a vacation at the beach. And just so funny because, he's out there playing in the waves and he doesn't like to get his hair wet. Okay. That's a big thing with certain autistic children. They don't like but he'll come out of there like soaking wet, giggling, laughing. We have a good time. Everything's fun for us. Just going to the grocery store is fun, because I've learned to appreciate the little things. I no longer see like, okay, I've got to get past this and have fun. I can have fun doing this. And just driving here, it was a better trip with him in the car. He was playing music. He's a tremendous, a savant, I guess, with music.
Really?
Because he can find,
he can identify the song?
He can identify the song, the artist. He has an iPod that has like 36 hours of music on it. And he just plays different songs, like rock songs, John Denver, songs from, African music on there. I mean, it's amazing the eclectical stuff. And he'll play it, and it's just like a soundtrack. It's so awesome.
That's great. It's great that you enjoy each other's company like that. I'm going to bring something up because you and I touched on it before the interview. A lot of people know autism from the movie Rain Man. Right. And when I spoke to Jack a little bit beforehand, I said he seems to have a little bit that affect that Dustin Hoffman portrayed in the movie. Do you relate to that movie at all? How accurate was that movie? Was it a positive effect you think it had?
I believe, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I believe that Dustin Hoffman did such a remarkable job. I guess when he was studying for the role, he lived with some autistic people for a while, and he pulled everything off, the affects, the look, his eyes, his just mannerisms. Unbelievable how good he did. That movie's great, although that movie comes up a lot when you have an autistic child, because
that's probably the
scene in the casino. Oh, great, especially when he starts pulling out dates and stuff. They're like, you should bring him to the casino. And my brother still thinks he could probably master roulette because he's pretty good with speed. But he doesn't have the language that goes with the math skills. When Dustin Hoffman starts counting cards, I'm sure Jack can count the cards. But whether he has a language to impose the strategy is a different thing. So I think that's just a Hollywood.
Yeah, okay. But the interesting you said is certain savant qualities. Yeah. That typical of autistic people?
I believe so. I believe that there's a high percentage of people with savantism that are autistic. I don't know the stat exactly, but I know there's a inordinate number of autistic people that are savants.
It's interesting how the brain works. Right?
He was 10 years old and he hacked into a big search engine.
Really?
And actually brought it down for a short while. He was downloading stuff off of me.
Anybody's listening out there, just ignore this part.
Well, no, it wasn't, because I worked with the company. It's funny. It is funny. But I worked with the company, and it was just amazing what he was able to do. Reprogramming stuff at 8 years old. He's reprogramming stuff, and
that's great.
And but those are his interests, and we're able to tap into that and let him, understand the world.
So, I don't want you to do, John, look into the camera, right? And tell us what kind of message you want to convey to people out there.
I want to convey that if you do have a child with special needs, it is hard. It is probably one of the most challenging things you're going through, but you're not alone. And there is a way out. And, you have to understand the problem before you can solve it. And I'm hoping that my book can help someone who's struggling kind of understand their situation so that they can find a path out like we did. And I feel that I owe that because I know a lot of people are struggling. Every year, like 500,000 people are diagnosed with, severe intellectual and emotional handicaps, and which means there's a family in crisis.
I don't know how you feel. I'm just curious. Do you have an opinion on this whole vaccine, autism?
Yeah, we talked about that. I'm really not an expert in any of that.
You really can't comment on it.
Well, I don't think it's fair to comment on it. It would be a strict. I haven't looked at studies. I don't understand.
I'm just curious because it's so in the news today.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. But I got one more thing. Again, the book is Parent in Crisis: Finding Peace and Purpose in a Special Needs Home. I urge anybody with an autistic child to read the book, or anybody in life to read the book, because I think there's lessons that'll help people in all areas of their life. Just in raising children in general, and people that when you're in crisis regarding a situation and how to overcome it. Mm-hmm. So how else would people get in touch with you, John? Is there another way through? I know, where is the book available? And
the book is available pretty much anywhere you can buy books. Amazon, you can go to Barnes & Noble. It's all online. As of right now, it's probably not in the local bookstore, but you can always ask.
Okay.
So anywhere where you buy books online, you can find it. You could also go, I have a website at johngoralski.com, and if you go there, or parentingcrisis.com, that has some links for buying the book there.
That's terrific. So I really I think it's great that you're in the studio. I think that lends to a more intimate conversation. And I want to thank you and Jack. Jack, thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
September 11th, 2001, which is coming up. What day was that? September 11th, 2001. Tuesday.
Yeah,
all right. That's great. That's great. All right, John, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you for listening or watching this episode. If you enjoyed our guest, please go to our website, awakeningsinreallife.com, where our guest shares a story different than their awakening. It's really very interesting. We also have bonus episodes where another individual tells their awakening story. Please also check out my book, Awakenings in Real Life, where I tell the story of my dad's awakening from his dementia and the message he sends that he still lives and appreciates life. It's available on Amazon, pre-sale, and also tells other family stories. If you know of someone who wants to be a guest on the show and has an awakening, please email me at info@awakeningsinreallife.com. We're also available on social media. Please tune in to our next episode where we share another remarkable awakening story. Finally, I want to thank Jay Belsky of Flawed Media of Rockville Center, New York, who did such a great job recording this episode.